Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere.
Welcome to another edition of the At Odds MMA show. I am your host, Brad Taschuk, and joining me on the line, as always, my co-host, Gabe Killian. Gabe, how you doing today?
Good, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing alright, and I was gonna say I can't complain, but there is one thing I want to complain about. We do call this show the At Odds MMA show, and there is something in the MMA world that I have to take odds with right now, and that is just all of the ridiculous challenges that promotions are making towards other promotions. I know everyone knows about the challenge that World Series of Fighting laid down for Bellator. That one I thought was a bit ridiculous just because it's not likely to happen. But the one that I really want to talk about right now is the challenge that came out just recently from the XFC to World Series of Fighting. I'm not sure if you saw this, but XFC, they put out a challenge from, I think, 135 up to welterweight in men's divisions, and then strawweight and I believe whatever's lower than strawweight, atomweight for the women's divisions, to challenge XFC. Basically, when I looked at this card, I laughed because it would be a complete sweep for World Series of Fighting if it actually went down. And there's just absolutely no business that an organization that XFC, who really their biggest export has been Nick Newell, who is in World Series of Fighting right now, they're not even close to World Series of Fighting's level. It just baffles me that organizations think they can just call out whoever and for some reason it's going to help them rather than just making them look like fools. And the thing is that I enjoy XFC cards. I watch them on Access. They're a good Friday night every time they come around, but that doesn't mean that you belong in the same league as an organization that has, John Fitch and Yushin Okami, Husamar Pahares, all these guys that are actual legitimate fighters, who aren't just guys who are trying to make a name for themselves. So, any thoughts on the XFC challenge or just these challenges in general that are coming out lately, Gabe?
Well, it's ridiculous, and I think the XFC knows there's a slim to none chance of it happening, and they just figure that they'll at least get publicity out of it. That's pretty much the main reason they're making the challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They figured.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I figured that. I'm sure they know there's a slim to none chance, and they're doing it mostly for publicity. That's what I think.
Yeah, and the only thing is that I don't think they're getting good publicity out of it. It just seems like people are sort of laughing at them in this situation, which definitely isn't what you want to go for.
Yeah.
What I do have to say, though, is if there was one sort of challenge or something that I could get behind, it would be if all of the promotions that are on Access TV somehow got together and, did a Grand Prix of all of their champions. I think that would be really cool if you saw, the champion from RFA and from XFC and from Legacy and MFC, all these organizations, if they put them into a 4-man bracket or something like that and did a little tournament. I think that would be really cool. But that's organizations that are all on the same level. It's not, XFC jumping up and challenging World Series of Fighting or anything crazy like that. And I think that would be good exposure for all of these organizations. And I think it would also be really good exposure for Access TV in general, and a great way to build up some guys who are probably going to end up in the UFC after that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I could definitely get behind that.
Yeah, but as far as these other challenges go, they've got to stop. I'm sick of it. It's stupid. Just finish it. It's over.
You don't even like the World Series of Fighting against Bellator at all?
I don't like the World Series of Fighting against Bellator. I think that, even when they went through and made that card, it was World Series of Fighting trying to make themselves look as good as possible. you didn't see guys like Patricio Pitbull on that card. Pat Curran wasn't even on that card. There were a whole bunch of guys that they, strategically left out from Bellator's ranks, because they know that, World Series of Fighting does have some good fighters. I will certainly admit that, but Bellator has so much deeper of a roster than World Series of Fighting that, yes, World Series might win a one-off fight if, Tyrone Spong took on Rampage Jackson or something like that, or, Rumble fought Rampage or anything like that. They might win those one-off fights, but if you look at the rosters as a whole, Bellator's got a way better roster than World Series of Fighting, and, Bellator puts on, for the most part, better fights than World Series of Fighting. We saw that this weekend with the top of the World Series of Fighting card being basically 3 squash matches. You had a minus 900 favorite in Justin Gaethje, and, yes, he looked impressive, but he was a minus 900 favorite. You're supposed to look impressive at that point. And then you had a couple, basically 4-1 favorites in Rumble and Jessica Aguilar, who dispatched their opponents like a 4-1 favorite should. So, it's just crazy that they think that because they have signed a couple of guys who have big names, that they're able to go through and challenge what is unquestionably the second biggest promotion in MMA right now. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, to make a long answer short, I didn't like the World Series of Fighting challenge to Bellator. It just another one that doesn't make sense. They know from a business perspective it's not going to happen because of the 2 companies that they're owned by. And, there's actually some news that came out earlier today that yet to be confirmed, I'll say that NBC Sports was sort of courting Bellator about airing some Bellator prelims or some Bellator fights, something like that. So, wow. Again, I'll say yet to be confirmed, but that's some news that was spouted a little bit today. So, some interesting things going on between some of the lower level MMA companies out there.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Anyways, we do have some fights to talk about that are at the highest level of MMA this weekend. We've got the UFC on Fox 10 card coming up, and we had some fights that went on last week, in the middle of the week, as the UFC Fight Night 35 card took place. So, what we're going to do first is a quick review of Fight Night 35. As usual, do our most and least impressive performances, and run down through the results, give you some quick thoughts if there's anything that we want to add there. And then we will get into the preview of UFC on Fox 10, and we do have the full betting lines for that card, so it's always nice when we preview a card and we've got those lines out so we can speak to those a bit more. So starting off with UFC Fight Night 35, headlined by Luke Rockhold, kicking the guts out of Costa Philippou. What was your most impressive performance here, Gabe?
I gotta go with Cole Miller, taking out Sam Cecilia in his hometown.
Yeah, that was, definitely impressive. Cecilia was actually a guy that I was pretty high on in that card. When his line was plus 160 in that neighborhood, I was seriously considering a bet on him. But luckily for me, there was a whole bunch of steam that came in on Sam Cecilia. I know you took advantage of this on the other side, but that kept me away from Cecilia, so it saved me money, and I know it made you some money because you were all over Cole Miller here.
Yeah, I initially hit him at minus 185 and all the way down to minus 115 at reduced juice at 5 dimes. It was beautiful. It went exactly as I predicted too. Rear naked choke in the first round.
Second round.
Oh, it was the second?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, Cole looked much improved on the feet. He was able to control distance a little bit better than he did in the past. He only really got in a little bit of trouble once in the fight when he was just circling the wrong way. He was circling into Cecilia's power. And other than that, he used some nice long punches to keep distance, ended up hurting Cecilia a couple times, and then once it got on the ground, everyone knew that he would have a significant advantage, and he put Cecilia away pretty quickly. So, very nice performance from Cole Miller. My most impressive performance, and I have to eat a little bit of crow here, it came from Luis Smolka. Smolka's a guy that, I thought he had some promise because he was a long fighter, but I hadn't seen anything that impressed me at all out of him on the regional circuit. He had some good top control and the ability to dish out some ground and pound when he was on top. But other than that, I thought that Oskilic was going to just steamroll this guy. He's the better wrestler, and that was the one advantage that Oskilic did have in this fight. But Smolka has a great gas tank. He was very impressive, much improved with his striking. And that's something we've seen a lot of out of these Hawaiians from 808 Top Team. They're all improving at such a rapid rate, and they're all so young that it's just crazy to watch these guys really grow up in the fight game together. But Luis Smolka, very, very impressive to me. One of the dogs to cash on this card. So another Hawaiian fighter to keep a lookout for is Luis Smolka.
Yep.
In terms of your least impressive performance, who would have that dubious honor?
I gotta go with Mike the Hulk Easton.
Yeah.
The guy has been showing zero improvement from fight to fight since he's been in the UFC. He's down 2 rounds. He doesn't even go for it. Not just in this fight, but in any down, and in the third round, he hasn't gone after it. I think he's pretty much going to be cut after this one. Even Dana White pointed out that he was down 2 rounds and didn't try to finish. Was all smiles after the victory. That's not the kind of fighter you want on your roster.
Yeah, and that's always been the problem with Easton is, he's got the talent. Obviously not as much talent as Dillashaw, cause he really got beaten up here, but he's never really had the mentality of getting out there and going after it. He sort of lets whatever's gonna come to him, and if it doesn't, then, oh well, it doesn't. So, never really a sense of urgency with Mike Easton. I think that's what we both said last week when we were previewing the fight, was going to be what would lead TJ Dillashaw to victory, but, Dillashaw was just better everywhere. So, that was only a contributing factor to the loss here for Easton.
Mm-hmm.
For my least impressive performance, I'm going to have to go with a guy who cost me a little bit of money on this card, and that would be Brian Houston. Houston, he did a pretty good job in surviving the first round. That's usually where Trevor Smith is dangerous, gets takedowns, goes for submissions, all that sort of stuff. Did a good job surviving the first round, even though he got in a little bit of trouble there. Did a good job in the second round, sprawling on Smith's takedowns, landing a little bit on the feet. Didn't throw as much as I would have liked in the second round. But then, man, in the third round, he just did absolutely nothing. He just stood there and let Trevor Smith win the third round and win the fight based on throwing, a couple of leg kicks. Houston did absolutely no sense of urgency from Brian Houston. He had that fight in his hands. It would have been an easy victory, and he just pissed it away, and he's probably going to get cut from the UFC too.
Yeah, Smith was gassed too. Houston could have finished the fight in the second round and just did not go for the kill.
Yep, could have finished it in the second round. Could have easily coasted to a decision if he had done anything in the third round. But obviously, he just really didn't have that much of a desire to win the fight. So, a couple of performances there that were good and bad. Another performance that was good was Luke Rockhold in the main event. A couple of kicks to the body that really hurt Costa Philippou and finished the fight. And I like how Rockhold tried to follow up with a soccer kick to the body just as Herb Dean was getting in there. I thought that was pretty cool. A nice little cap to the end of the fight. A little bit of violence come in there. Brad Tavares picked up sort of his signature workman-like decision over Lorenz Larkin, just outworking him in the first and second rounds, and Larkin tried to come back in the third round, but just a little bit too little too late. The most interesting fight to me on the cards, in terms of how it played out, was between Yoel Romero and Derek Brunson. What were your thoughts on this fight, Gabe?
Brunson definitely surprised me. I did not expect him to take control of Romero like that. And as the third round started, I thought to myself, all right, Romero needs a knockout now. And in the first couple minutes, he wasn't going for it. And I took out my phone. I started writing on Twitter. I typed, Romero's not even trying to finish. And just as I was about to click send, he hurt him. And then he went for the kill, and within a minute or so, he got the TKO, and I never sent that tweet.
I actually sent a tweet, sort of the opposite, at the start of the third round. I'm like, oh, Romero's just out there clowning with Brunson. The vicious knockout's gonna come in 3, 2, 1, and then, it was a couple minutes after I sent that tweet that he actually hurt and finished Brunson, but, this guy is just liable to do anything in the cage at any time. He's got huge power. He's a fantastic athlete going back to his Olympic and World Championship wrestling days. Just crazy to watch. This fight had, the shit your pants gate, where apparently Romero shit his pants, but we're not quite sure. He also punched Brunson right in the balls at one point. This was just a crazy fight. Not necessarily the greatest fight in terms of action, although it wasn't lacking for action, but this was one of the most memorable fights to me, that I've seen in a long time. There were just so many things that happened in this fight that, they made you sort of sit up and go, wow.
Yeah, man, Brunson got really hurt. That was kind of sad to see too.
Yeah, apparently Brunson broke his jaw, and I'm sure his insides still don't feel good a week and a half later, based on those elbows that he took to the body.
Yeah, those were vicious.
Yep. The other results on the card: John Moraga taking a split decision over Dustin Ortiz. Personally, I scored at 29-28 Ortiz, but it was very close either way. Moraga did a little bit more in the third round on the feet, so I can't really argue with people scoring it for him. Ramsey Nijum taking a decision over Justin Edwards. Another fight here that I was wrong on. Elias Silvero absolutely dominated Isaac Valley Flag. I thought that Valley Flag would be competitive in this fight, but he just got blown out. Vince Pichel, my buddy Vink Pichel, taking a decision over Garrett Whiteley. He looked much improved in terms of his wrestling and grappling. Didn't see so much of his striking in this one. And kicking off the cards, another impressive performance. I know you really enjoyed this one. Beneil Dariush taking out Charlie Brenneman by first round rear naked choke.
Yeah, lost some money on it, but enjoyed it nonetheless.
Yep. Sometimes winning and losing money isn't the greatest thing. I had Brenneman in a parlay myself. I thought that his wrestling would get the job done, but very good job by Dariush to crack that chin that we've seen is a problem for Brenneman many, many times before.
Yep.
That does it for UFC Fight Night 35. So we are going to move in quickly to UFC on Fox 10 because we do have a full card to break down here. Kicking off the Fox 10 cards, and this is going to be on UFC Fight Pass, which again, stream quality, everything like that has been great, and it seems like they're starting to get more fights added into the database there, so slowly those improvements are getting made on Fight Pass. It still won't be all the way there by the time they get to people starting to pay for it, but you can see that they're at least putting in a little bit of work. And one thing I just want to mention, there's a guy that I follow on Twitter. I'm not sure if you follow him as well. His name's Fight Ghost. He actually did a review video of the UFC Fight Pass which was a pretty good video. It wasn't just something that was out there bashing Fight Pass. It actually had some constructive criticism in there, just about searching and how they can archive everything. So if you haven't checked that out, he's at @fight_ghost on Twitter. Just look through his timeline. I'm sure you'll find that video. But that was a good 10-minute watch that I had earlier this week.
Yeah, and Ben Folks has a pretty good article on it too.
Yeah, that one came out. He had that one a couple weeks ago, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so go check out some of the resources there just to see some different perspectives on what Fight Pass is and what it could be. Anyways, kicking off the fight card on Fight Pass is going to be a heavyweight bout between Walt Harris, who is 5-2 and 0-1 in his UFC career, taking on Nikita Krylov, who is 15-3, 0-1 in his UFC career as well. Neither of these guys really impressed in their UFC debuts. Harris lost to Jared Rosholt, and Krylov lost to Sopalele in one of the worst fights that I've seen in quite a while. So at this point, the betting odds have Walt Harris as a big favorite. He is -400. Nikita Krylov is +310. Who do you like here, and is there any bet to be made, Gabe?
I like Walt Harris, definitely. I like him to win inside the distance, most likely in the first round.
Yeah, I also like Walt Harris. I don't necessarily know if he's going to win in the first round, although all of his victories in the past have come very early on in the card, or in the fight, so I think all of them have been inside the first rounds. But I just think that Nikita Krylov, he has basically zero striking technique. He's got very limited wrestling. You know, if you go back and look at his fights from the regional circuit in Russia and Ukraine, basically what he would do is clinch up with guys, body lock them, and then just sort of tip over. And most of the time he would end up in top position against these guys. But something like that isn't going to work against Walt Harris. You know, we saw that he doesn't have the greatest wrestling, but Jared Rosholt is a very good wrestler, and that's what was really able to give Harris some trouble in that fight. Neither of these guys have great cardio, so the one thing that I was looking at is maybe the over 1.5 rounds. That's been something that has come through quite a bit lately with these heavyweight fights where, you know, guys, they're sort of lower level UFC fighters or, you know, guys who are maybe a little bit higher on the regional level, and they're fighting guys who are about the same caliber. They just don't have great finishing skills, so when these fights go past the first couple minutes and they don't get the finish, they get tired, and then the fight just sort of drags out. So I can see that happening again here, but I do really like Walt Harris to get the win here. Definitely not something that I would bother playing at -400 though. Moving on to Fox Sports 1, we've got a welterweight fight between two fighters making their UFC debuts. Mike Rhodes coming in with a 6-1 record, sort of made a name for himself in the RFA welterweight division. And George Sullivan at 14-3 has come up through the Northeastern Circuit, CFFC, organizations like that. Right now we've got betting lines that sit with Mike Rhodes as a -255 favorite, and Sullivan is the +195 underdog. Who do you like here, Gabe?
This is actually the fight I'm currently working on capping, and from the tape I've seen so far, I give the edge to Rhodes, but I don't know if he should be a -255 favorite. I think he's overvalued, but I think he's going to most likely put away a decision here. George Sullivan's a pretty good fighter, man. He's good on the feet, has a good base. They're both really good. I think it's more competitive than the line suggests, but if I had to pick a side at this point, I'm going with Rhodes, but I still got more homework to do on this one.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where I don't have a great read on it because even though I've seen Mike Rhodes fight a few times, I know pretty much what he brings to the table. It's been a little bit tougher for me to find information on George Sullivan, and find good tape on him. I've seen like some highlight packages and things like that, but those obviously they're really pretty much worthless, to be honest. Until you see the actual fight tape, you don't really see guys' tendencies, what they're really good at. But I do think that from what I've seen, Rhodes does have a few more tools. I think that striking is going to be pretty even in this fight. Sullivan's a bit of a brawler. Rhodes is a little bit more controlled in his striking. But I think that in terms of grappling, I think that's where Rhodes has a bigger edge. So if this goes to the ground, he's going to be able to maybe advance position, maybe take Sullivan's back, control him a little bit. I think that's where Rhodes is going to have a lot of success, but if it does stay on the feet, this is going to be pretty competitive. The other thing that you have to take into account is that Rhodes is coming out of the Rufus Sport camp, and I think there are at least 3 or 4 guys from this card who are from Rufus Sport, so he would have had some good preparation coming into this fight, even though it was made on a little bit of short notice. So another fight where I do like the favorite, but I'm not thinking that I'm going to bet this fight in any way. All right. Yeah. Next one that we've got is a fight that we know a little bit more about both guys. It is in the lightweight division between 2 tough live competitors, and that would be Darren Cruikshank with a 13-4 record, taking on Mike Rio, who is 9-3. Right now we have Cruikshank, basically the same line as the Rhodes Sullivan fight. Cruikshank's minus 250, Rio is plus 190. What are you thinking here?
I think the Detroit superstar, Darren Cruikshank, is gonna just outwork Mike Rio on the feet, and I think he's gonna hurt him with body shots and stop him probably in the first round. I think he's gonna probably just hurt him with kicks to the body, hooks to the body. As soon as Rio gets hurt, I think he's gonna pretty much quit, and the strikes will follow up and the ref will step in. That's how I see this one playing out.
Yeah, this fight is pretty weird to me. It makes sense because they're 2 guys who were on Tough Live, so, there might be some, beef that they've got or something like that, or, it just might just work out that 2 guys from that show are on this card. But I think this fight is actually pretty close, and it's not because Mike Rio is particularly skilled. I think that Darren Cruikshank is definitely the more skilled fighter here. He's the better striker. I would say, maybe there's a slight edge to Rio in the wrestling, but nothing significant. But Rio, he just seems to put a little bit more pace on guys than Darren Cruikshank does. We've seen in fights where Cruikshank, sometimes he comes forward, sometimes he lets himself get pushed back. But we pretty much always seen with Mike Rio that he does like to be pretty aggressive, especially with his takedowns. He goes for them quite regularly. So I can see maybe if he goes for a high volume of takedowns and manages to get a couple, maybe there's a way that he can steal a decision here, but more likely than not, Darren Cruikshank is going to pick up the win here. As you said, maybe by an early stoppage. I can definitely see him hurting Mike Rio as guys have done in the past, but it's nothing where I want to put my money on Darren Cruikshank just because he can be a little bit inconsistent in his performances. At the same time, I don't really feel like there's any upside to betting on Mike Rio either. Maybe the only way I would touch him is if I could put it in a round robin with a bunch of other underdogs or something like that, but again, no reason to really throw your money away on this. So I'm gonna pick Darren Cruikshank, but no bet for me in this one.
Yeah, I like Cruikshank in a parlay with Walt Harris. I really like both of those guys to win.
There you go. And if you're looking at where the lines are right now, that parlay would come out at about minus 130. So only paying a little bit of juice to get two guys that should come through in their fights.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next fight that we've got is moving down to the bantamweight division. It is Hugo Viana taking on Ramiro Jr. Hernandez. I think he likes to be called Junior, so I'm going to call him Junior, but his actual name is Ramiro. Hugo Viana is 7-1. Before he came to the UFC, actually all of his wins were by decision, and then he's shown a little bit of punching power since he's come into the UFC. He knocked out Ruben Duran in the first round. He actually hurt TJ Dillashaw pretty badly in their fight as well. So, starting to show a little bit more explosiveness in his game is Hugo Viana. And he's taking on, as I said, Junior Hernandez, who is 13-5. He lost his UFC debut to Lucas Martins. Very early on, they were sort of brawling. He got clipped, and then Martins took his back and choked him out in 1:10 in that fight. So right now, looking at this line, another one that's a fairly steep line. Hugo Viana is minus 350. Ramiro Hernandez plus 260. Any value here?
I think the line is accurate. Hugo Viana should come away with an easy win. If he doesn't finish him, he should, I think, pull away with a 30-27. Hernandez is better than he was in his octagon debut against Martins, but he's taken a step up here, and I don't think it's going to fare well for him.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same thing. It seems that Ramiro Hernandez, he's fairly well-rounded. He's going to be bigger than Hugo Viana. I think that, Lucas Martins surprised a lot of people with his ability to make that cut all the way from 155 down to 135 and still look pretty decent. Hernandez isn't going to have to deal with the big size difference here. He's going to be bigger. But I think that Viana being so much faster is going to be a problem for him in this fight. Even though he doesn't have a huge reach or anything like that, Viana is pretty accurate with his strikes, and he does throw a lot of power in pretty much everything that he does. So I do see him probably clipping Junior and finishing this fight, but at minus 350, maybe throw him in a parlay, but nothing that I really like right now in this fight. We'll see what happens when the props come out. So
yeah, I would like that minus 3.5 on it.
Yeah, that'd be something, because then you'd get either the decision, or if he gets the stoppage, you're covered either way. So I can see that coming through, and based on what Viana did before he came to the UFC, he was very prone to going to decision. We haven't seen that so much since coming into the UFC, but that would be something that would concern me if I was just betting Hugo Viana inside the distance. And I'm not sure if you guys are noticing the trend yet, but I really don't like a ton on this card for betting in terms of what I've seen so far. So hopefully some lines will move, some things will change from where they are right now. When props come out, maybe some of those will be juicy, but there's not going to be a whole lot of bets that, unfortunately, I'm going to be giving out in terms of the podcast today, just because there aren't a whole lot of bets that I like out there right now. Moving on to the next fight that we've got, and this one is, again, in the bantamweight division. A whole lot of bantamweight fights on this card. It is between Chico Camus and Yatsin Meza. Camus is 13-4 in his MMA career, 1-2 inside the UFC, and he's done the win-loss-win thing, although I felt like he got a little bit of a gift in his last fight. I thought he lost that fight against Kyung Ho Kang. And he's taking on Yatsin Meza, who is 20-8 in his MMA career, 1-1 in the UFC. He managed to get the win over John Albert in his last time out after just pretty much getting destroyed against Chad Mendes in his UFC debut. Right now, Chico Camus is just under a 2-1 favorite. He's minus 195. Meza is plus 160. Who do you like here, Gabe?
Yatsin! Did I say that right?
Yatsin. I don't know, Yahtzee.
Yeltsin Mesa. I love that name. Yeltsin.
Somebody get out the dice. I've actually got a Yahtzee board, sitting on one of my bookshelves here, so maybe I'll have to play some Yahtzee later today, just in honor of Benson Henderson's training partner.
It's funny, man. Yeah, man, I already locked him up at plus 160. I actually, think he should be a favorite in this one, and I'm glad to get him as a dog. He used to fight at featherweight, and Camus should be fighting at flyweight. So after Meza beats him, he'll probably drop down. And he'll have the size advantage, height, a few inches of reach, maybe at a striking disadvantage, cause Camus is with Duke Rufus and everything, with the Pettis brothers and all. But Mesa's been showing improvements in the department, so I wouldn't be surprised if he uses his reach, gets better of Camus on the feet. I wouldn't be surprised at all. He has better fight IQ. That combined with the size advantage and everything, I give him the edge, and at plus 160, I gotta go with him.
Alright, so, a pick for the underdog here, the first underdog of the day. I am gonna go on the other side, picking Chico Camus here, but I can definitely see where you're coming from with this pick. Meza is gonna be bigger. I really don't think it's gonna help him on the feet too much, just because Camus does have good movement. He's gonna be a lot faster on the feet, and he's definitely more skilled and more accurate on the feet. So I do give Camus quite a bit of an edge there, but if Meza can use his size to get some grappling going in this fight, that's where I think he can have a lot of success. We saw even in his last fight, Camus's last fight against Kyung Ho Kang, that he was able to be taken down, controlled, he could get his guard passed, and Yatsin Meza, obviously we know that John Albert has his conditioning issues, but Yatsin Meza was very active, very aggressive on the ground, and, I do think that based on his skills there and the size advantage that he's got, he's actually going to be a little bit more successful if this fight hits the ground. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see where this fight takes place, and I just think I give a slight edge to it taking place on the feet, with Camus using his movement a little bit and Meza not really being able to get a hold of him. But one thing that you brought up that's an excellent point is that Chico Camus has pretty terrible fight IQ, so I would not be shocked at all if he engaged in some grappling here and got himself in trouble. So Chico Camus, he's the favorite right now, but again, another favorite that I cannot trust with my money. Yatsin Meza, he sort of falls into the Mike Rio category for me, where I don't necessarily think he's going to win this fight, but I do see a route that he can, and maybe the only way I would play him again is looking at a round robin. So, picks going opposite ways, but I can definitely see a little bit of value in Yatsin Meza in this fight. So that will be an interesting one to see how it plays out. Next, another bantamweight fight. As I said, there are quite a few of them here, between Eddie Wineland, former WEC champ, former UFC bantamweight title challenger, and obviously he's coming off of the loss to Hayden Barao in his last fight. He is taking on Yves Jabouin, and just so you don't listen to Joe Rogan and call him Yves Joboy or whatever Rogan says, his name is Yves Jabouin. So I'm Canadian, I speak a little bit of French. That's relatively close to how it gets pronounced.
I call him Yves Yabois.
There you go. So right there, your pronunciation's a little bit better than Joe Rogan's, but still pretty horrible. Anyways, Eddie Wineland, 29-1 in his MMA career. Jabouin is 19-8. And right now, Wineland, another big favorite, minus 355. Jabouin is plus 265. Any value on the dog here, or is Eddie Wineland going to roll?
Eddie Dub is going to roll, baby. If not a knockout, 30-27.
Yeah, I see the exact same thing. You know, Wineland, he's a pressure striker. He keeps a high pace up. Jabouin doesn't have great cardio. You know, he's a talented striker. He was outstriking Brad Pickett before he got caught, but that's another sort of X under his name, is that he doesn't have a great chin. He's getting older. You know, he is probably not going to have too much of a speed advantage in this fight, and I think Eddie Wineland's just going to pressure him until he breaks. So Eddie Wineland I like here. Maybe you can use him as a parlay leg because, you know, that 355 tag is a little bit steep, but you know, it's nothing too crazy. So that might be something that I look at in terms of a play for this card. Again, nothing locked in right now. Want to see where the lines move. Maybe that Wineland line comes down a little bit.
Yeah, I like him in the parlay with Viana.
There you go. So Eddie Wineland and Hugo Viana, both around 350. I think that parlay would probably pay about minus 150 at this point. So a little bit more juice than the other one, but you can definitely see that one coming through. That's a parlay that I would feel very confident in as well. All right, moving up to the main event of the prelims. I always love how there's a main event of the prelims, like it actually means something. But this is about, which is pretty interesting. It is between Sergio Pettis, brother of Anthony, of course. He is 10-0 in his MMA career, and he is taking on Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres, who is 9-5 in his MMA career. He does have a no contest as well, in a fight that he won against Kyung Ho Kang. Another one where I thought Kang got screwed, that I thought Caceres should have lost. But he's a guy who
I thought he won.
Pardon?
I thought he won.
Okay, so definitely a close decision, we'll say, in the Caceres Kang fight. But
it was overturned into a no contest, yeah.
Exactly.
Because he tested positive for marijuana.
Yep, which something that just makes no sense at all, but those are the rules. We're not going to get into that right now. But the thing about Caceres is he's made so many improvements since he came out of the Ultimate Fighter. You know, coming off that show, I didn't really think much of him at all, but he's actually turned into a pretty damn good bantamweight. So we know that Pettis has quite a bit of hype, both because of his performances and because of his name. So this one is going to be very, very interesting, I think. Right now, go ahead.
If you ask me, Caceres is technically 6-0 at bantamweight. He's got that loss to Edwin Figueroa, which was a split decision where he was deducted 2 points for groin kicks. But even with the 2-point deduction, he should have won the decision. I don't know how he lost the split. Yeah, he got robbed in that one, and then the no contest too, which I scored from. I count him as being on a 6-5 win streak, and I think he's one of the most overlooked bantamweights in the UFC right now. The guy's really good and constantly improving. But my one complaint about him is he doesn't really have a killer instinct. He doesn't try to finish guys. And I even once asked him, he had Roland Delorme kind of hurt. Delorme was tired, gassed out towards the end of the fight. I asked him, how come you didn't go for the finish? The guy was tired. How come you didn't knock him out? He said, I don't try to knock people out. I don't want to knock him out. He gave like a peaceful answer, you know. So the guy's just trying to win fights and not really hurt people, which is dangerous because he's been in a lot of close decisions, and some of them have gone against him, like the Figueroa one, and the Kang one could have gone against him too. The guy, he needs to get that killer instinct, because he could finish opponents but just doesn't go for it, and that could hurt him against Pettis if it goes the distance. Yeah,
speaking of close fights, he's actually had, of his official fights, 3 of the last 5 have gone to split decision. So, maybe that lack of killer instinct is hurting him in some regard.
Yeah, I thought I gave the 29-28 clearly to him. I thought he clearly won the second and third rounds, but one of the judges gave it to DeLorme. You can't do that. You gotta try to finish, man.
Absolutely. In terms of this being a close fight, as you said, and Caceres being in a lot of close fights, I think that this one is a little bit closer than where the line sits right now, and that's Sergio Pettis as a minus 215 favorite with Caceres plus 170 underdog. What do you think about that line? Do you think any value in Caceres?
Definitely. I love him as a dog, especially at the closer it is to plus 200, the better. I do give him the edge. He'll have a size advantage, bit of a reach advantage. Pettis is really underestimating his stand-up skills, and I think he's making a terrible mistake because while Pettis is like a talented, flashy, effective striker, you could say the exact same for Caceres. The only difference is Pettis actually tries to hurt his opponents and finish him, while Caceres just mainly tries to score points and stuff. But I do think Caceres is really talented on the feet, very versatile, constantly improving, and I can see him getting the better of Pettis on the feet, surprising him, and making him think,
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree about him getting the better of Pettis on the feet, but, him being 4 inches taller, having a 4-inch reach advantage, being a southpaw, all of those things are going to make life a little bit more difficult for Pettis on the feet.
Yeah, and he moves around really well too. He could stick and move pretty well.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be competitive on the feet for sure. And the big thing is, Caceres doesn't use his wrestling offensively a whole lot. He sort of gets into scrambles instead of really going for any takedowns of his own, which he's good in those scrambles. I think that if he uses his wrestling offensively in this fight, that he's got a fairly easy path to victory, because Sergio Pettis is another one of those guys who I think he should be down at 125. He's fought a lot at 125 in the past. I don't know if maybe he's outgrown the division or what's happened there, but I definitely think that Caceres is going to have a grappling edge here, and as I said, it's going to be very competitive on the feet. So I actually made a play on Alex Caceres at plus 200 already. That's the only bet I've actually got locked in for this card so far, but I think that, this is basically sort of a pick'em fight, and Pettis having the name that he does, the last name that he does, is making him overvalued a little bit, but he is a very, very talented fighter in his own right. Definitely a deadly striker, just like his brother, but he doesn't have quite the same skill set that Anthony has at this point. So I do like Caceres, who I've underrated a bit in the past, although I have made some money off him as well. I remember picking him to beat Damasio Page and making a little bit there. But, Caceres, he's been underrated, and I think he's continuing to be underrated. So I've got a little play on him in this fight, and hopefully that one comes through, because it seems like we're both on the same page there, Gabe. Kicking off the main card of UFC on Fox 10 is a featherweight battle between Jeremy Stephens and Darren Elkins. Elkins is 17-3 in his MMA career, and Stephens is 22-9. Stephens has obviously looked very good since dropping down to 145, and Elkins has been historically one of the most underrated fighters at 145. So this is going to be a tricky battle to see who comes out on top and who moves up the division a little bit more. Right now, this is actually one of the closer lines at the books. I think this is actually the closest one on the entire card at this point. Stephens is a minus 150 favorite, and Elkins is plus 120 as the dog. What do you see in here, Gabe?
It's a really competitive matchup, definitely. It's a hard one to say as far as who's going to win, but I'm leaning towards Stephens because I'm really loving him so far at featherweight, and I just don't see him really getting stopped yet. Elkins could definitely stop him, but it's not going to be easy. If he does, he's going to have to grind it out. Stevens is just a beast at featherweight. I went against him in his past 2 fights, and he made me pay. He was an underdog in both of them. The guy is just really good. But that's it. I can't bet against him yet. Not against Elkins. I can see it because I can see Elkins grinding it out. I'm not that confident Stevens could win, but I am edging towards him. But the bet I am looking at for this fight is the over 1.5 rounds at this point, which is at minus 230. I think it's worth like a 2-win 1-unit bet, or at least for a parlay. But I'm gonna make a straight play on it myself, definitely.
All right. I agree with you that Stevens is probably the more likely winner, although I think I have a little bit more confidence in more confidence in him than you do. I just think that, as you said, he's been very, very good since he moved down to 145, and we know what Elkins wants to get in there and do. He's gonna throw strikes to try and set up takedowns, and then just really try and grind on guys for the remainder of the fight. The only problem is that his actual wrestling isn't all that good. And I think that Stevens, especially now that he's down at 145, he's very, very solid there. I think he's going to be able to avoid the takedowns, and Elkins really isn't a great striker. He does get hit quite a bit, and I think Stevens can either batter him up or maybe even put a finish to this fight. So I do like Stevens quite a bit. He opened at minus 130, and I was hoping that maybe the line would flip and turn a little bit towards Elkins, and I could get Stevens at even money or as a dog, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Even still, at minus 150, I'm considering a play on Jeremy Stevens straight up, because I do think he gets the job done here at 145 against Elkins. So Stevens, he's not a bet right now. I'm going to wait until the lines tighten up a little bit more later in the week, see if I can get a better number than the minus 150. But I am eyeing Jeremy Stevens for a bet and to continue his run at 145. I just think that this is a little bit similar to Darren Elkins' fight with Chad Mendes. Obviously Stevens isn't as good, I would say, at anything as Chad Mendes, but in terms of being a better striker who can keep the fight on his feet, I think that that's a pretty similar style matchup. Alright, moving up one weight class to the lightweight division, Donald Cerrone, as Cole Miller calls him, Donald Clownboy Cerrone, is taking on Adriano Martins. Cerrone is 21-6, and Martins is 25-6. So, two very well-respected and long-tenured fighters. And, actually, I take back the well-respected part, because Adriano Martins, in his last fight, that actually saw one of the crazier line moves that I saw all of last year. I know that he opened, I believe, as a minus 160 favorite against Darren Cruikshank, and he ended up closing at plus 130, which made no sense to me because I thought that Martins was a significantly better fighter there, and obviously the betting public disagreed. Unfortunately for me, I was in Panama at the time, so I couldn't bet on the fight, but I definitely would have been on Martins in that situation. So it'll be interesting to see how this line continues to move, because it seems like with that performance he did earn some respect, as this line against a much tougher opponent in Donald Cerrone, right now Cerrone is a minus 185 favorite and Martins is plus 155, so he's only a little bit more of a dog here than he was against Darren Cruikshank. Do you think this line is a little bit more accurate than his last fight out?
I think it should be closer. I see value in him at the current line, actually. I'm personally going to make a play on him as a dog, but I'm going to wait till the weigh-ins to lock my bet, mostly because his last fight against Darren Cruikshank, which was in Brazil. He was huge against Cruikshank, and I could tell he was juiced up in Brazil for that fight. But I'm interested to see if he's going to be juiced up at in Chicago in the United States at the weigh-ins, because it won't be easy to get away here. But that's what I'm going to be looking for at the weigh-ins, to see what kind of shape he's in, to see if he's taking any steroids or whatever. And then I'm going to decide on my play after that. But I'm definitely leaning towards Martins at this point. And if signs show that he is looking big and possibly juiced up, and that's definitely going to cement my play.
All right. When you said juiced up, I wasn't sure if you meant like actually juiced up, like on steroids, or just he was excited to be fighting in Brazil. But it appears you mean the former, right? He's actually on something.
Yeah, he was really big. Yeah.
All right. So hopefully, the testing comes through here, and if he is on something, we are made aware of that. But hopefully he's clean, and this fight goes off without a hitch. But this is about where every Donald Cerrone fight, I just have no desire to bet it, because sometimes he'll come out and he'll look amazing, like he did against Evan Dunham. And then sometimes he'll come out and he doesn't look inspired at all and puts on a really shitty performance, like against Rafael Dos Anjos, or, just lets Anthony Pettis kick his guts in, or anything like that. So Cerrone's just very, very inconsistent, very hard fighter to bet on, and even more difficult to feel confident in. I do think that he's the more talented fighter in this fight. I do think that if it stays on the feet especially, that he'll be able to, box or kickbox Martins up a little bit. But if Martins is able to get some takedowns, we know that Cerrone's aggressive from his back, but Martins has a good jiu-jitsu game. He can avoid those submissions and maybe squeak out a decision. This just really depends on how focused Cerrone is on implementing his strengths here. So I think he should win, and he's going to be my pick here, but Cerrone's one of those guys that I can't feel comfortable betting unless he's against someone that is just a perfect stylistic matchup for him. All right. The co-main event of the evening, which is interesting because it's probably the weakest co-main event that we've seen on a Fox card, maybe ever. It's even weaker than the Benson Henderson Clay Guida fight that was a co-main event that wasn't even really a co-main event because it didn't get shown on Fox.
It's even weaker than the co-main event for the JDS versus Cain Velasquez one fight, which was no co-main event.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. It's because that was Benson Henderson and Clay Guida, even though it didn't actually get shown on TV, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird fight to have in this sort of really hyped up and this really this spot with a lot of notoriety. So we'll see how that plays out, and if it turns into an exciting fight and makes me eat my hat here. But I can also see this fight playing out kind of boring. We've got Gabriel Gonzaga coming in at 16-7. He's taking on Stipe Miocic, who is 10-1. And I can see this fight going a lot like Gonzaga's fight with Brendan Schaub from a few years back, where Schaub he was faster, he was the better athlete, he sort of picked at him and won a decision. I see some of those similar traits in Miocic here, where, he's got good power, but he doesn't always really go in there and try and go for the kill. He can be a little bit smarter about his striking, pick his spots sometimes, so I can see that same sort of thing playing out here. And Miocic right now, he's a -240 favorite, which I feel is pretty fair. Gonzaga's a +200 underdog, which although he's dangerous, he can end any fight with a knockout or with his submissions if it goes to the ground. He's at a lot of disadvantages in terms of physical skills here. So again, another fight where I like the favorite to win, but I'm not sure if I really want to lay money on him just based on how dangerous Gonzaga is. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I like Miocic, but I do think he's kind of overvalued. But I think Gonzaga's dangerous, especially lately. Did you notice that in his last fight, he looked bigger and more muscular than he ever has? Or
I can't say I really picked that out. He's always just been sort of a big guy. I think, maybe he's a little bit more solid than he used to be.
Yeah, he used to be more flabby, but in his last fight, he was all muscle, man. Yeah, he's stronger than ever, I think. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes through with the upset as an underdog. I think he's a live dog, but I do like Stipe. I think he can easily outstrike him as long as his cardio is in check and he keeps moving. I think he can easily win the fight. He can stop it too, especially in later rounds when Gonzaga gets tired. That was Miocic's only issue in his loss to Stefan Struve when he gassed out and Struve took over and TKO'd him. As long as his cardio is in check, which appeared to be excellent against big country, I think he's not going to have a problem cruising against Gonzaga. If he doesn't finish him, I don't see why he wouldn't get a 30-27. That he just has to keep moving and keep a striking defense up and not get caught.
Yep. So I actually agree pretty much with everything you said. One thing that I was looking at in this fight, because the odds, the full prop odds are out for this bout, is Stipe Miocic right now, his odds to win in round 1 are plus 150, but the odds for any other results, which would mean Gonzaga can knock him out, Gonzaga can submit him, Stipe can finish any other time other than the first 5 minutes, or he can win a decision. The odds for that is minus 190, which I'm thinking that, Gonzaga's gotten this rap as having a really bad chin, but you look at the guys who have actually knocked him out. Travis Brown did it with those ridiculous elbows that he throws. Junior Dos Santos did it, and he's one of the hardest punchers that we've ever seen. And Shane Carwin did it, and he's another guy who's just a bricked up guy who can throw hands and is a ridiculously hard puncher. The other times, even though they're TKOs on his record against Verdum and Randy Couture, it's been more an accumulation of Gonzaga getting tired, a guy getting good top position on him, and really just beating him up. So I think he's got a little bit of a better chin than people think. So I'm really liking that anything other than Stipe in round 1 at minus 190. I think I'm going to throw that in a couple parlays with some favorites that I do expect to come through. So, maybe Eddie Wineland or something like that. Throw that in there with Stipe not in round 1. And I think that could make a decent play. Alright, moving on to the main event of the evening, and even though this fight isn't for a title, it's not as there's not as much hype behind it as there has been behind some of the other UFC on Fox main events. I really, really like this fight between Benson Henderson and Josh Thompson. It should be a phenomenal fight. I think it's going to be a very close fight. Definitely closer than what the line indicates right now. And we've got in this bout Benson Henderson, current record of 19-3. Of course, he is coming off of his loss to Anthony Pettis at UFC 164. Josh Thompson is 20-5 in his MMA career, coming off the win in his UFC debut against Nate Diaz. And he's looked, in his last couple of fights, really better than we've ever seen him. The KJ Noons fight was a little bit of a snoozer, but a lot of people thought he beat Gilbert Melendez in their third bout, and then he looked very, very good against Nate Diaz. So I think in this fight, I'll let you go first, but the odds right now have Benson Henderson as a minus 280 favorite. Josh Thompson is plus 240 as the underdog. Where do you see value there?
I agree with pretty much everything you said. The fight should be closer than the odds suggest, but I see it going all the way to a decision, and I lean towards Benson, but I wouldn't be surprised if Thompson takes it either. I see value in Thompson, but I'm personally not going to take the risk in betting it. For a bet, I'm looking at the over, which was at minus 190 last I checked, I think.
Yeah, I think it's minus 195 now.
Yeah, minus 195. Yeah, I'm looking at that for a bet or a parlay, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely, some of the things that you can look at here, and some of the things that I hear a lot of people talking about are the over, fight going to decision, all that sort of stuff. When Benson Henderson was UFC lightweight champion, my old standby bet for him always used to be Benson Henderson by decision. That used to come through in pretty much every fight that he was in. That I can see happening again. It's minus 110 right now, which I think is, I think it's pretty fair considering Henderson is the more likely winner, and I would be pretty shocked if he was able to finish Josh Thompson here. The other thing that I might just put a small flyer on is Josh Thompson by decision at plus 500 right now, because I think if this fight does stay on the feet, Thompson's actually got a little bit better movement, and Henderson gets a lot of love for his kicking game, but I think Thompson can really go kick for kick with him there. So, it's going to be pretty interesting to see what Henderson's game plan is, because I think his best route to victory is to try and go for takedowns, get some top control here, and grind out some rounds that way, because if it does stay on the feet, it's going to be right down to the wire, just like all of Benson Henderson's fights seem to be of late. So if it stays on the feet, I can definitely see Thompson maybe pulling out a decision, because he is a very, very good striker in his own right.
I think it's probably going to be a fight where takedowns win rounds.
Yep, it might even be one where, Henderson doesn't do a whole lot for the first 4 minutes, just sort of keeps it close and then goes for the takedown in the last minute, like we've seen from him in the past, or tries to turn up the heat in the last 30 seconds and, throw a bunch of strikes in flurries, even if they're not landing, to sort of catch the judge's eyes. But Henderson is one of those guys that, regardless of, what you think of him or his fighting style, he is a guy who resonates with the judges. He gets a lot of love from the judges, so hard to argue with backing Benson Henderson here, but, betting him straight, I just think that's way too much juice to pay in a competitive fight.
Yeah, and if you're a person who likes to follow trends, Henderson is typically a fighter who is impossible to finish, and he was just finished by Pettis, and Thompson just finished Nate Diaz, who is also a fighter who's impossible to finish. So a trend would be for Thompson to finish Henderson, but if you follow trends, that might be worth the bet. But I'm personally staying away from it.
Yeah, you can definitely see things starting to turn that way, although the finishing methods in both fights were different. Thompson obviously winning by TKO against Nate Diaz, and Henderson getting submitted by Anthony Pettis. So maybe not read too much into that. Before we get out of here, one last thing to do. What we do every week is a fight for everyone to go check out. So because I didn't give Gabe a whole lot of warning about this, I'm going to go first with this week's fight. And it does involve one of the main event participants from this Saturday's main event. It is Josh Thompson, and it's a fight from his first stint in the UFC. It's about with Hermes Franca at UFC 46, which I think is probably one of the best UFC fights that really doesn't get any credit at all. This was an absolutely phenomenal fight that went all 3 rounds. It was exciting. It had a little bit of everything, striking, grappling, whatever you want. And it was between guys who were 2 of the top lightweights in the world at the time. So go check out Hermes Franca and Josh Thompson from UFC 46 if you do get a chance to find that tape, or if you've got the DVD lying around somewhere. What's your fight this week, Gabe?
I'm gonna have to go with Donald Cerrone against Benson Henderson in their first fight, when Cerrone lost a unanimous decision. That was a really brilliant 5-round war where Cerrone kept going for submissions, becoming up short, and Henderson just got the better of him. It was an excellent fight, and I enjoyed it every time I watched. So if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. Great WEC fight, one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the best WEC fights of all time. Let me ask you a question. Did you actually score that for Henderson or Cerrone?
I believe I did score it for Henderson.
All right.
But I didn't see that, fight live. I saw it sometime after that aired.
Okay. Yeah, I remember watching that one live. I think it was the first, third, and fifth rounds that I scored for Donald Cerrone. I'm not sure if I've got the rounds exactly right, but I remember that I definitely did score the fight for Cerrone for the submission attempts and some of the damage that he did on the feet as well.
Yeah, I should probably go watch it again and actually score it, because the couple of times I have watched it, I was just enjoying it, not actually keeping close attention to the score and everything. It was a pretty close fight, but I didn't argue against the call. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely one of those fights that you can go back and watch at any time, like so many of those WEC fights are. You know, I think that's something that, you know, maybe I should put a list together of some of the best WEC fights of all time, because it's an organization that often gets forgotten about, but, you know, you look at even this card, and a huge number of these fighters did come from the WEC. Benson Henderson in the main event, Cerrone's here from the WEC, Eddie Wineland, former champ. You've got a whole bunch of guys that came out of the WEC and are still, even in the weight classes that weren't exclusive to the WEC, are still relevant and top-ranked guys in the UFC. So at the time that it was around, it was my favorite organization in MMA, and WEC never die. Anyways, before we get out of here, Gabe, as always, where can the people find you on Twitter, and what can they look out for from you in the coming week? At Gabe Killian MMA on Twitter, and I'll have plenty of fight articles coming up. Very nice. I am at Brad Taschuk. The podcast is at Odds MMA, and feel free to follow us, interact with us on those platforms, and keep an eye out for my bets. I always tweet them out before the event or before the specific fight that's going down, just to lay down my official bets and, record keeping purposes and all that fun stuff. Until next week, enjoy the fights. There is also an RFA card, but we've also already talked a whole bunch this weekend, or about this weekend's fights, so keep an eye out on the site if we've got any plays for that RFA card. A couple interesting title fights that they've got going on as well. Should be a good cards. But until next week, enjoy the fights. Go make yourself some money.